Hey, welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. As always, I'm your host, Pat. So, a couple of things before we get into this. Got an update for you. Going to talk about some CDs here. A little bit of a collection update. Kind of delving into some more kind of gloomy doom death stuff as the temperature is dropping, but I'm still exploring a fair amount of 70s proto metal, hard rock, psychedelic stuff, krautrock, and things like that. It's been my steez lately since I came back. So I have a small stack of stuff I'm going to discuss this update. If you hadn't gotten a chance to check out my last update, it didn't pop up in your algorithm. It's a shorter video, so it might not have. I'll put a link right here. It's the second music video collage, or whatever you want to call it, that I threw together for my latest release on my label, GZS Physical Media, by the band Time Under Earth. It's the second song on the cassette. It's a long release for 2 songs. It's about 13 minutes of kind of industrial tinged doom death stuff. I've been speaking about it a fair amount at length lately, so if you hadn't heard about it yet, there's a link for it in the description below if you'd like to pick up a cassette. Okay, so it's been pretty mellow past couple of weeks. Just been kind of hanging out, doing my thing, working, listening to music. Nothing super important to update you on life update wise. Not a big guy to talk about that kind of stuff anyway. Just buckling down for the tourist season here in Salem, and it being a more arduous process to get anywhere if I have to go anywhere near downtown. By the end of October, I'm not going to be here because we're wisely getting out of here for the Halloween season. But as that's building up, I'm starting to listen to gloomier stuff. It's just what I've been in the mood for. Stuff that's a little bit heavier, going back into growly vocal kind of music. And the top of this pile reflects that, kind of exploring some more kind of doom death stuff, dipping my toes back into that. Although I've been more kind of craving the Peaceville style, kind of gothic sort of doom death stuff, as opposed to things that are just sound like slowed down death metal, like bands that ape Asphyx or the slower moments of Incantation, things like that. Haven't really been in the mood for that type of doomy death metal as of late. I want to just issue a few corrections, as I always do. Now that I'm trying to be on a schedule, just as something to have consistency in my life, regularly upload stuff. I'm not putting as much work into reading about every little thing with bands. I'm just kind of flying off the cuff, throwing in corrections during editing and that sort of thing. So there's a few things that slip under the radar as I'm kind of rapidly trying to throw together videos and talk about the music I'm listening to. Missed a few things. I mentioned I thought Brain Ticket, the band I talked about last update, sort of a psychedelic kind of prog kind of band, said that they were British. They're not. Their members are from Germany, Switzerland, and I want to say Italy. All over the place. I was corrected on that by a viewer. Thank you very much. Steroid. I was under the impression that it was a woman vocalist. I'm sure they were trying to trick us all. It was one Australian dude, very new to this scene. I know it's a lot of related members and things like that. Ben NG, longtime contributor to the channel, commenter, corrected me on that. This is a one-man project, Steroid. So that's 2 corrections there, and there was one more that I am forgetting right now. Let me see. I am doing this in real time. Oh, right. Valhall. I was talking about a Norwegian band called Valhall that are more along the lines of traditional kind of doom metal stuff. Very good for its time. I mentioned that the CD came out on Had Not Found. And I was surprised that I did a quick glimpse and Google, looked on Metal Archives, of course, to see if there was anybody notable from Norwegian black metal in the band, since they were on Had Not Found in 1993. And I did a quick read and I was like, oh, nobody's name who I recognize. Gilve Fenris from Darkthrone plays drums on it. He's using a surname on it. So I am not a professional YouTuber. I don't run one of those channels where I do a bunch of research, reading on Wikipedia, and then present what I got from the internet as fact and act like I know what I'm talking about. I am just a fan of music like anybody else that is just sharing my discoveries and hoping for a little back and forth, a little discourse and contributions to the conversation that I am spurning here on the internet. There's a few podcasts I listen to that have a similar kind of take, namely First 7-Inch Club, which is excellent, and Demo Listen, where the hosts are like, listen, we're not music journalists. We're not a fan of that kind of pretending we're really important people. We're just fans. They have a disclaimer. Each one has a disclaimer. Maybe I'll start doing that. I don't know. I feel like programming myself for a spiel like that is just going to make me trip over my words more. But at any rate, that's me. Just a fan, just a punter. You know, I try to provide people with the correct information, of course. If I slip up, I usually try to correct that. So that being said, that caveat out of the way, let's get into this pile of stuff here. This is Thalarion, Dying on Scorched Plains. It's a band from Slovakia, 2021 release on Uprising Records. So I've just been kind of, you know, in the mood for stuff that's a little bit more heavy, atmospheric, got some kind of death metal vocals, some growly stuff. I've been kind of working that back into my palette here. I've been doing a little bit of reading on Reddit. There's like a few doom metal subreddits, and there's of course Weedian that pops up all over social media all the time. And I don't remember where I read about this. I think it was Reddit. And it's almost to the line of like maybe a little bit too cheesy for me, but I am enjoying it. It's death doom kind of stuff with very angelic kind of female vocals all over everything. Certainly if you like stuff like Tristania and, you know, certain moments of Paradise Lost early on, that sort of stuff. There's only the thing with like vocals like this, if I let it remind me of Evanescence, it ruins my enjoyment of it. So I try to avoid that, but it is pretty darn good. There's a lot of keyboards on it that actually remind me more of like a just keyboard wise of black metal from the mid 90s, you know, Emperor and Dimmu Borgir and that sort of stuff, that kind of more orchestral kind of sounding black metal stuff. Keyboards remind me of that. The rest of that is pretty solid death doom, great, pretty inhuman sounding death metal vocals next to the angelic weeping marble angels on the pillars of heaven, crying tears of nothingness onto the plains of humanity or whatever. Pretty good. Then we got Mourning Beloveth. This band's from Ireland. This is awesome. This is great. It's again got that very dramatic, drawn out doom death kind of thing. You know, point to the Peaceville 3 all day long. But also, the clean vocals on it remind me kind of like of Solitude Aeternis or Candlemass style or Capilla Ardente or something like that. Very dramatic sort of power metal or kind of epic doom kind of vocals, trading back and forth with inhuman death metal growls. Lots of emotion behind it. Very, very good stuff right there. Mourning Beloveth, Growl Records. I think this came out about 10 years ago, something like that. Then Eye of Solitude, Soy Cader, which is, I'm trying to remember, I actually looked this up. What does that mean? It's a Latin, I believe, for self-redacting. I think it's Latin. This is leaning towards funeral doom, if you couldn't guess. It's not quite as glacial and slow that a lot of funeral doom is, but certainly if you like evoking and all that stuff, you'd appreciate this, I'm sure. Very, very inhuman growls, getting to the point of gutturality. I'm gonna just say that's a word. That's a word now. Gutturalness, low register, where, like I've alluded to recently, past couple years on the channel here, I'm getting kind of tired of vocals that are that low. The pillared register of vocals, other than the OGs who did it, I'm not really feeling as much, but it works really well for this brand of death/funeral doom stuff here. Then a Boston band that I was not aware of. I mean, I'm very, very, very much not plugged in with anything going on in the Boston scene these days. I did make it into town to see Lifeless Dark right after I moved back. That was awesome. Great show. But as far as like new bands and stuff like that, I have no idea. And I'm on social media less and less all the time. So Summoner is great. Not sure how long they've been around. This is from the Day of Doom Festival. There's a series of CDs, probably LPs too, I'm assuming, live releases from this one particular festival. Summoner's great. Soaring, clear vocals that have a little bit more of like a smokiness to them. Almost kind of reminds me of John Bush from Armored Saint and Anthrax, of course. Not your typical kind of Messiah Marcolin or Robert Lowe kind of thing, a little bit more soulful. And reaching into like, I wouldn't say like heavily into it, but almost like slightly more mellow proggy elements here and there. Excellent sounding live recording. Easily could have been a studio recording. Everything sounds really great and awesome band live. And then a band that I've been meaning to spend more time with and check out more for quite some time. When I was kind of rediscovering a lot of doom metal stuff in the late 2000s, I believe I downloaded some of their shit, and I have another disc somewhere else that I think is just an EP. But I'm glad to be spending a little bit more time with Lord Vicar. This is a 2008 release, Fear No Pain, and it's got a bonus CD that is a demo, I think, or an EP. This is rad. It's got the guitarist from Reverend Bizarre and none other than Christian Linderson on vocals. That guy's been popping up a lot, getting mentioned on this channel fairly frequently lately. Vocalist for some early Count Raven stuff, and vocalist for St. Vitus on one album, Children of Doom. And this is just that perfect, very slow but not too slow, occasionally kind of rocking, mournful heavy metal, pure doom, pure perfect Finnish doom metal stuff with a Swedish vocalist. Then we've got Doomster Reich. Don't think they're actually sketchy. I think it's just more of like a 60s drug cult kind of thing. There's a picture of Charles Manson on the inside. I mean, they're Polish. There's nobody politically sketchy in Poland. It's fine. This is I don't know, late 2000s, I think, something along those lines. This band's been around for a grip. This is very indebted to Electric Wizard, as you could probably imagine. A little bit more upbeat in points, a little less like fuzzed out and through a wall of fog, but very, influenced by, psychedelia, the occult, 60s cults and stuff like that. Very heavy. It's a solid release. Nothing super awesome to write home about, but it gets the job done. Then, I never really messed around much with Candlemass after their reformation. It pretty much stopped around, I want to say around Nightfall for me. Just the classic records. Never really explored that much. Ancient Dreams is one of my favorite doom metal records of all time. I did give King of the Grey Islands a quick listen a long time ago when it first came out. I was curious to hear what Candlemass would sound like with Robert Lowe from Solitude Aeternus singing. And I was kind of underwhelmed. I wasn't really into it at the time when it came out. I just recently repurchased a box set with all of that era of stuff, including the original non-rough mix version of this self-titled. And all that stuff is really solid. I'm not sure what I was thinking at the time. I probably just wasn't in the mood for it. But this just came out recently. This is a rough mix of the self-titled, The Return with Messiah Marcolin from 2002, and this friggin' bangs. It's so good. Just everything that was great about their original run with Messiah Marcolin. The vocals are incredible. The sort of more verging on upbeat parts are super fist pumping. There's, the song Witches is legitimately like if one or two things about the riff were slightly altered. It's like it could be like a Tough Guy mosh riff, those kind of verging on metal kind of beatdown kind of riffs or whatever. It's a super like hard song, unintentionally so. But this is a fantastic, oh man, this is so good. This is excellent doom metal from Candlemass. I mean, I'm probably more likely to reach for this than a lot of stuff from their original run. I'll always love Epicus and Ancient Dreams. Nightfall's great, and Tales of Creation is really good too, but those don't nearly hit me the way the other ones I mentioned did. And this one just sounds so good. It's a rough mix, but man, rough mix by like professional metal band standards is like pretty good sounding, pretty full sounding. I'll have to I haven't given the original mix a listen yet from that box set. And I'll talk about the box set when I spend a little bit more time with it, probably next update. Then we've got Spectral Voice, Sporagmos. I slept on this for a very long time. This is the latest from Spectral Voice. Huge gap between their last full length and this one. This is the second one, I believe. And they had an EP before that, if I'm remembering right. This is the doom death kind of band that features members of Blood Incantation. There's a lot of hype around these guys at one point. I think clearly Blood Incantation kind of superseded that. And to be honest, I don't hate this, but it's not really doing much for me. There's a lot of strong similarities to Disembowelment, maybe a little bit less so than their earlier stuff. They're kind of striking out on their own a little bit more sound-wise on this. But I don't know. This isn't really sticking with me in any particular way. There's nothing really that memorable to me. I've listened to it a handful of times. I mean, atmospherically, it's, very heavy and dense and crushing and all that stuff. Sonically, it's certainly impressive, but I don't know. There's just other stuff I'd rather listen to than this that sounds like this. And again, that sort of like very cavernous corner of what can be considered doomy death metal or whatever, not really. I need some harpsichords in there or some shit. I don't know. I need something else. Give me something else, fellas. Then we got this Neurosis live CD. I just grabbed this from Big Fun, I believe, in Beverly, just because it was cheap. I kind of cut off with Neurosis at a certain point. This was recorded in Stockholm, Sweden in 1999, which I believe would be the Times of Grace tour. I think it was through Silver and Blood, then Times of Grace, and that was around the time this was recorded. However, this sounds great. Like the Summoner record, it sounds like it could be a studio recording. Everything sounds perfect. I feel like a lot of the more kind of gauzy elements of the studio Neurosis stuff that was like maybe a little bit too much for me. Post Word is Law, post Souls at Zero, the relapse stuff that Neurosis did, their particular brand of whatever you want to call. It's kind of hard to pigeonhole into a genre. Neurosis is just Neurosis, but elements of sludge and some kind of progressive stuff and post-punk and whatever else. I feel like this is a more stripped down, approachable version of the stuff they did that was on the Relapse records that came out at the time. And they certainly are belting it out on this. So that sounds great. Then, okay, so that's all the heavier stuff. That's all the growlier stuff, the more metallic stuff. The rest of the pile is me going on my own journey, exploring proggy stuff, proto metal, hard rock kind of stuff, and psychedelic music. So one thing that was recommended to me when I started talking about Faust on that initial update, my return, a glorious return to YouTube, a lot of people threw krautrock recommendations at me. A lot of the stuff I was familiar with, at least on a tertiary basis, like I'd heard of it from a friend of a friend, maybe checked out a YouTube link or whatever. You read enough online, you get like the whole, oh, this is a summation of the scene. One name that I heard pop up a lot, and I will give credit to, I think Eric Bauer talked about these guys on one of his updates at some point over the years, was Cosmic Jokers. And this is just entrancing, jammy prog stuff from Germany. It's like 2 songs. They're each about 20 minutes long each. But very sort of meditative and spiritual and really cool sounding. I can't help but think of Omega Mart in Las Vegas when I hear the term Galactic Supermarket. That big art installation that has a whole lore behind it of opening dimensional rifts into a supermarket. Look it up. It's amazing. We went there on vacation a few years ago. But I digress. This is just, if you're not into hearing stuff that's kind of jammy and navel-gazy, I don't recommend this at all. But it is cool how they jam into stuff and fall into these different kinds of grooves and everything. And it's a great journey of a listen. They do what they do very, very well. Another recommendation, I'm just going to go back into a recent recommendation from my last video centering around recommendations. This is Stark Naked. Viewer Herbie Bridge recommended this to me, and I remember seeing this in a record store at some point. It's a pretty memorable cover of like this weird clay face, kinds of odd stuff going on. Danzig notoriously lifted some of the riff from All Them Witches. It's not all scary, doomy proto metal all the way through. The second song, Done, easily could be like a piano ballad straight out of, like, I don't know, a mellower Beatles song or even like Elton John or something like that. Sins is just kind of a rock and jam that's got a slight, like almost kind of Motown and like funk influence to it. So it's not all, crushing Sir Lord Baltimore style stuff or Dust or something like that. And it's got proggy elements too, longer songs, lots of different kinds of instrumentation going on. But worth for the price of admission for All Them Witches alone. Like what a banger of a track. It's like 8 or 9 minutes long and super epic and dark and rad. Then May Blitz, British band. I think they're British and one Canadian guy, if I read right there. Interesting. May Blitz and the 2nd of May. It's a 2-on-1 kind of deal. The self-titled is very much, British rock band, heavily influenced, or part of maybe even the British invasion stuff, 1970. Got a lot of blues stuff going on. You could tell they really liked Hendrix and the Hendrix Experience. It kind of sounds like that a lot. Maybe Cream, that kind of thing. Kind of more meandering kind of songs, though. It gets kind of proggy and weird at moments. And then the second album, the 2nd of May, is getting a little bit more fuzz on that. The first album doesn't really have much in the way of guitar distortion or anything along those lines. There's a lot of like electric guitar that's pretty much not distorted at all, and then like some acoustic stuff. Second one gets heavier. They lean more into like a kind of a Deep Purple or Blue Oyster Cult kind of thing a little bit. Gets a little bit heavier, a little bit more stank on the guitar, a little bit more grit in the tone there. Very good. I prefer the second one. I like the 2nd of May a lot, but I've been listening to this a ton. Then you've got Scruffy Duffy by Duffy. It's just Scruffy Duffy by Duffy. And this is more almost kind of that like junk shop glam kind of stuff. It's pub rock, hard rock from the early 70s. One of those bands in Britain that like made a living playing army bases in Germany, which a lot of bands did. The Beatles did, Black Sabbath did, and everything. These guys, it was kind of the same story. They were huge on army bases in Germany, but didn't really seem to have that much success in the UK, I guess. I'm guessing. But it's got moments of it that it's not just all kind of like rockin' good time, razzmatazz kind of shit. That sort of glam element is there, but they do get dark and heavy at certain times, and it's good. It's kind of all over the place in moments. It's still very much like 70s rock and roll, but they've got a lot in their toolbox, so that's enjoyable. Dragonfly, self-titled. Just kind of picked this up on a whim off of Amazon because it looked interesting. This is a band that was a complete project. It was all like career musicians that lived in couple of different places in the US, according to the liner notes. I'm trying to remember. One of them was Colorado, I think. And basically they had management that wanted them to come out to San Francisco during the Summer of Love to come out, and make money off of that, I guess, and play cover songs. But they decided, or their management decided, it's actually a better move to write originals. And all of this, except for one song, which is a cover, Hoochie Coochie Man by Muddy Waters, all the rest of it's all originals and was written and recorded in the studio and just kind of like came and went. And it's pretty heavy for its time, like fuzzed out acid rock kind of stuff with real like brittle, like ripping the speaker mesh kind of leads, those kind of real tinny kind of sounding leads that you get with like that kind of hard rock. Like a good example is, the way Iron Butterfly sounds tonally. Like that's kind of what this is. There's like certain pop elements and everything, but it does get kind of trippy and weird at certain points. It's a quick listen, 12 songs in 35 minutes. So cool, like fuzzed out, like somewhat kind of garagey, kind of psychedelic rock stuff from a band that wasn't really a band. They had a bunch of other names where they played covers and then got together to do this Dragonfly projects and recorded it and then called it a day. So that's interesting to me. Then we've got the debut from Cannes, Monster Movie. I have Tago Mago as well. That's a real weird record that I need to spend a lot more time with before I really talk about it at all. Monster Movie is blowing my mind. I just got this the other day and I wanted to hold off on talking about it a while, but I automatically want to gush about it. This band gets mentioned all the time when people are talking about krautrock. It's one of the most well-known bands under that genre name. German band, obviously. This is their debut from 1969, and it is so out of time and weird. To me, it sounds like almost like a post-punk band. There's elements of it that really remind me of Wire, the not fast punky parts from Pink Flag, but the more dreamy elements of Wire, more so maybe from Chairs Missing or something. Very odd, like noisy elements. I can't believe this came out in 1969. It doesn't sound like anything else from that era. It sounds way, way, way ahead of its time. Very, very cool stuff. There's one song on it that's a sprawling epic, which is You Do Right, which is 20 minutes long. This is, according to the liner notes, like their most American friendly record. And it doesn't sound like anything else from the time to me. There's very little that screams like 1969. It all sounds like 1978 to me. There's even elements of it that I don't, it's a complete coincidence, I'm sure. Although who knows? I think maybe a lot of those guys from that scene in the mid 80s in DC checked out Can, but there's moments that almost remind me of like bizarre, like arty post-hardcore stuff, post-revolution summer kind of shit almost. Very, very cool, my friends were screaming about this band for years and checking them out. And I tried listening to Tago Mago, I think that because that's the one that everybody kind of talked about. And I was just like, this is too oddball for me. I'm not ready for it. But now I'm ready, at least for the debut from Can, Monster Movie, 1969. Then we've got Spooky Tooth. So this was a British band from late 60s into the 70s. You may have heard the name. I think their biggest claim to fame was Gary Wright, who wrote the song Dreamweaver, which was a big, 1970s AM Gold kind of hit. I believe it's in Wayne's World. That's a huge hit. Gary Wright solo, I think. The other notable thing about this band is they wrote the song Better Than You, Better By Me, covered by Judas Priest on Stained Class. So, Judas Priest had a tendency to do that in the 70s, cover these kind of almost pull out what was dark about these original rock songs that were dark on their own, but I don't know if people thought about it that way. The Green Manalishi obviously being another song that was like a really heavy, dark song. And if you listen to the original, it's not that much of a departure. And it's kind of the same thing with the Spooky Tooth song on this. It's a great kind of evil song naturally. And they have a bunch of those. One thing I've noticed, I think it's just coming from the blues and the era. There's always some song called Evil Woman or like Bad Woman. And that's no exception here. There's a song called Evil Woman on here. Not the one that Black Sabbath covered either. And then 2 songs later, Oh, Pretty Woman. Not the Roy Orbison original either. So looks like they cover I Am the Walrus. This is just great kind of crunchy, garagey sounding late 60s hard rock with some cool organs and stuff like that all over it. It's very British Invasion era kind of stuff, but it does lapse occasionally into stuff that is a little bit darker and a little bit weirder. But there's plenty of blues and soul all over it with like a lot of the rock music at the time, particularly rock music from the UK. And well, from the UK with a keyboardist / singer, Gary Wright, who is an American guy. And then Aftermath by the Rolling Stones. I have a bunch of Stone stuff. It's one of those bands, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk about for one reason or another. People love the crap out of the Rolling Stones, and I understand why. They wrote a lot of great songs, like a lot of bands like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and a lot of huge bands of that ilk. I'm into the hits. I like the bangers. That's why I bought this, is that the first song on it is Painted Black and Under My Thumb is on it. So I figured there's probably some other good songs on this, and it's good. I mean, it's the Stones. If you don't know the Stones, I don't know what to tell you. A bunch of English guys that were heavily influenced by our blues and our Motown stuff, and it shows on this. I mean, Painted Black, when it used to pop up on classic rock radio and my dad would pick me up back in the day, I loved that song because it was such a bleak song. It's been covered tons and tons of times by all kinds of bands. I think Earth Crisis covered it, and lots of people covered it. Awesome, killer original, like dark rock and roll song. And that's what the Stones were known for, being like kind of the seedy underbelly of rock and roll at the time. How much of it was opposed because they were art school students or whatever, that's up to debate, I guess. But awesome album. Exile on Main Street is probably my favorite by them. That's another one that I have. But again, total casual fan, filthy casual fan here. Then, I mean, I saw this pop up online and I was like, man, that's a 70s band called Primeval, like a demonic looking, poorly drawn Dungeons and Dragons first edition monster manual face on the cover. Like, how am I not going to buy that? And it's cool. You know, it gets lauded a lot, or at least has a few times online by Decibel and a few others as like another proto metal, you know, kind of thing. It's certainly got a heavy, you know, 70s hard rock thing to it. It's an enjoyable hard rock record. Is it proto metal the same way? Like, I keep mentioning them, but it's because they kick so much ass. Proto metal in the way that Sir Lord Baltimore or even Blue Shear is. Maybe at moments, but there's a lot of it that's just kind of like straight up boogie rock. It's an infernal boogie rock, you know. Smokin' Bats at Campton's is the name of this. These guys were from Indiana, I believe. These guys were from Indiana, and the next band was from Idaho. And that's, I mean, this is super on the nose for my channel. Kind of why I'm saving this for last. It's like I almost feel embarrassed showing this off. But a band called Salem Mass, Witch Burning. And the opening jam, 10-minute song called Witch Burning, the title track. You know, there's a verse and a chorus, and then it's just a 9-minute jam freak out with like a continuing, pretty ripping sort of bass line, you know, like down and dirty, nitty gritty kind of 70s groove with just Moog freak out over it for 8 minutes. And I love it. I think it's glorious. And the rest of it's decent. It's all hard rock, you know, leaning into prog a little bit with some wild keyboards, you know, some sort of, gets kind of Wakeman-y in the keyboard department, but it's awesome. You know, it's a fun listen. You know, it's not gonna, you know, kick the Flower Traveling Band out of your record collection over superiority or anything, but it's pretty cool. And then this is in the pile. I don't know why I haven't listened to this that much. A Heavy Dose of Light, Psych. It's very much more the like Strawberry Alarm Clock, Blues Magoos, you know, kind of lighter pop psychedelic stuff. From what I've heard, you know, I've listened to maybe a couple songs and it's enjoyable. A lot of these bands, I'm like, is this more of a case of like a lot more Dragonflies where it's just like a band that recorded one thing and then proceeded to not exist anymore, only did a 45 or a private press thing? Because none of these I've heard of. Not that I'm like captain knowledgeable about Psych necessarily, but I know a little bit. But there's the first band on it's called the Misty Wizards. So, you know, I'm down with anything that involves wizards, except for the KKK. Not cool with those guys. They're not very nice. Attic Sound, White Room, Chimp, Mystery Track, Ballroom, Teddy and His Patches. So a lot of these I'm like, this easily could be like a bunch of people that just, you know, did this as a project and it's actually one band or something, you know, like, are these real? Am I being punked? I'm sure it's real bands, but again, I am drastically unfamiliar with everything on this, but it's an okay listen for the background. But this sort of like very almost poppy Incense and Peppermints kind of style Psych, I got to be in the mood for it. It's not usually my thing. It's got to have a little bit of drug-addled darkness to it, you know? And then completely unrelated to everything else, but it's here and I'm going to talk about it, is the Botch live record that came out a couple of months ago, a month or two ago. I think it's like their final show, if I'm not mistaken. If you don't know Botch, they were a hardcore band from the Pacific Northwest. They were from Seattle. A lot of people associate their sound kind of being similar to Converge. I like Botch a lot more. Not that I dislike Converge, but Converge is just a lot, you know. Botch had very kind of like mathy blender, start-stop riffage, but it was just like non-stop assault. Not fast in the same way that, you know, speed metal is fast, or, you know, with a, you know, a 4/4 beat circle pit kind of beat or anything like that. It was more like chaotic, but they were just non-stop falling apart. Primo, just chaotic hardcore of that era. You know, look no further than Dead Guy and Botch for the best of that sound, in my opinion. But yeah, really chaotic, noisy, falling down a flight of stairs, but like perfectly tight riffs, math rock riffs, falling down a flight of stairs. And you know, these dudes, they're a little bit older than me. They're still getting up there, but look at that jump. Look at that. That's a good jump for an older fella, for an elder statesman. Good on that guy. I'm sure he hits the gym. All right. That's it for now. More of this crap to come. More Doom. Maybe a little bit of death metal. getting back into that a little bit. Maybe a little bit more psychedelic stuff. I don't know. We'll talk about what we'll talk about next time. One of these updates, I'm going to talk about something other than music. I don't know. Video games, just thoughts on life, thoughts on YouTube. Could get dangerous there. We'll see. You have a good one. Take care. Have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. I'm monetized again, so hopefully you'll be seeing this more easily. Click on that video I uploaded last week. Not a lot of people saw it, I feel like, so check it out. It's 5 minutes long and kind of disturbing. Have fun. Bye.